did this ourselves.
They're coming. It can't be.
Where is everyone?
Hey, survivors, MakeShift here, and on today's episode of the Apocalypse Postcast, a podcast, we're going to be reviewing Netflix's newest post-apocalyptic offering. It's a fantasy sci-fi dystopian lore salad called Tribes of Europa, and we're going to let you know if this one is rad or just bad. To help me along this eroded road today is the Swede with the Wasteland Communication Corps.
Corporation.
What?
We're the Wasteland Communication Corporation, no matter how many times you and Jared both say Communication Corps.
but isn't it shortened to Corpse?
No, it's shortened to Corp.
Corp.
Yeah.
You know what?
Just like in every
I blame?
sci-fi show you've ever watched.
The fact that core is pronounced not how it's spelled, I think throws us all off.
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah. Okay, so
Stupid
the Wasteland
French people
Communication.
messing up our language.
I know. Darn French. I'm a little bit French, so you can blame me.
Okay, yeah, that sounds fair.
But I'm only taking 1/4 of the blame because I'm only a quarter French.
I also want to know, would it be okay if we consider this show rad and bad? Just like, I'm not saying it is. I just want to, does it have to be either?
If you want to go like the 1 thumbs up, 1 thumbs down route, okay. But I'm going to try to make you be a little bit more decisive.
All right, fine.
So, Swede, what makes us authorities in movie reviews?
Oh, we are not.
And
We are neither
why
of those things.
And why should anyone care what we think?
No one should care what we think.
Yeah. Okay. That's just to say that we're just going to be two fans talking about our thoughts and opinions. If yours differ out there, that's cool too. Just leave them in the comments.
Yeah. Netflix is not paying me to good mouth or bad mouth this show, and neither is MakeShift.
That's a really good disclaimer. That's very corporate of you.
Yeah, we're good at that.
Did your Swedish legal department tell you to say that?
They didn't even have to. It's been so drilled into us at the WCC over the years.
All right. So I'm going to start out by saying, let's do a short, like no spoiler section, and then we'll stop and do a warning, and then it'll be free reign from there.
Okay.
That way we can let the listeners know if they want to go watch the show, go watch it and come back and kind of,
and then
listen to the rest of the discussion.
See if they're full of shit.
Exactly. Yeah. You can decide if you want to come back and listen or not.
Yeah.
All right, so for this show, The Tribes of Europa, here's a quick summary. This comes kind of a mishmash from IMDb. The year is 2074, 45 years after a global catastrophe causes Europe to fracture into dystopian, warring tribal microstates. That's a word salad, isn't it? Who vie for dominance over the other states. 3 siblings from the peaceful Origine tribe get caught up in the conflict when they come into possession of a mysterious cube. And I think that's a pretty fair summary.
That's a pretty fair summary. I feel like it only talks a little bit about the setup and very little about the show.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like that's the like you find out all of that in like the first minute of the show.
Oh yeah, basically with the titles that come on screen.
Yeah, there's some opening narration there that is just like, yep, here's the setup.
Yeah. I think let's see. And did you watch the trailer that I sent you?
I did, yeah.
It was actually the teaser, so it was even way less information than the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
What were your initial thoughts when you saw that?
My initial thoughts, I think, were that this was going to be really predictable.
Uh-huh.
And without spoiling anything, I think it was. I personally don't mind predictable television. It makes me feel smart. I'm like, aha, I got it. If you don't like predictable TV, maybe that's going to be like a bit of an annoyance. And I felt that already from the teaser. And then when I started watching the show, I was like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When I saw the teaser, you start to see some of these like post-apocalypse themes happening. And there is some like alien-esque technology. So sometimes when things go too sci-fi techno in a post-apocalypse film, it kind of loses my interest a little bit.
Sure.
But this one was really intriguing because I love when stories have just a little bit of magic. And I don't like True Blood. True Blood was about vampires, season 1, right? But then by season 2, they added werewolves, and by season 3, 4, 5, we're talking witches, fae folk, just anything. There were
It
no
was
rules
full
anymore.
World of Darkness. Yeah.
Exactly. But that first season, when the vampires were that little bit of magic, I felt like the show stayed grounded.
Yeah, it wasn't like too wild. And it feels less fantasy and more like, okay, this is kind of a plausible thing that like maybe humanity just doesn't know about. It's like letting you in.
Yeah,
It's kind of the thing that X-Files had in the beginning where it was plausible to the point of like, oh yeah, this could totally be a thing. And then, as the seasons progress and they have to keep adding wilder and wilder crazy things, it just becomes like, okay, this is Lord of the Rings now.
yeah. So I like that there's all these tribes that are living together in a post-apocalyptic lack of technology world, but somewhere out there somebody has like this higher technology. I think that's cool.
Yeah, agreed. And it didn't feel
Uh
like the technology was like super off kilter for being, the 2070s or wherever we're supposed to be set.
yeah, exactly. It was definitely today's technology plus just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Um
personally like I'm a little bit, I don't want to say tired of it because that's not it, but I feel like the apocalypse happened in the 80s is a little bit done. Like I enjoy the concept of there's a post-apocalypse with all the tropes that come with that, but
mhm.
it didn't happen like in the past. It happened in the future. So technology might have gotten like a little bit further than where we're at before everything collapsed.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, all right, so the 80s were like pre-internet, pre-mass communication, and so for you to frame the post-apocalypse around that, you immediately take away, any kind of worldwide communication that with any kind of effectiveness, and it kind of happens the same way with horror movies. A lot of the best ones take place before cell phones because if you had a cell phone in a horror
Right.
movie, solved.
It's like the transporter problem in Star Trek, where as soon as you have invented the transporter, you have to invent for every episode a reason why the transporter doesn't work, because otherwise your episode's going to get real boring when everyone can just transport out of whatever situation you're in.
Yeah, that's a
It's like
really good
every
point.
episode of Star Trek TNG starts with like why the transporter doesn't work in this episode.
Mhm.
Oh, there's a magnetic disturbance. Okay. And the post-apocalypse is that fix, right? You kind of fix it, and you gloss over the fact that we still have communication satellites that work just fine today that were launched in the 60s.
Right.
Like they're
That's true.
60 years
They'll
old and they
never
work
run out of
just fine.
power.
Right. They're just fine. I can use them with a handheld radio, like gloss over.
Uh-huh.
We can just say everyone who knew about that died.
Yeah. And the technology for like generating localized power is going nowhere, no matter how bad things get.
Right.
So
It's one
yeah.
of the things that felt weird to me. Obviously, I'm in the Wasteland Communication Corporation. We started off as a ham radio club.
Uh-huh.
Australia is a huge country for ham radio because they have lots of people living in the middle of nowhere with no infrastructure. And seeing them use the heliograph in Mad Max Fury Road, where they're reflecting sunlight to talk between Gastown, or no, the Bullet Farm and the Citadel. They were shooting
Right.
light beams between each other. That's super cool and works just fine. But like, you have cars, so you obviously have 12-volt power. You're in Australia, a country full of ham radios. You could just talk to them if you wanted to.
Or
It'd be
at
very
least a good
easy.
chance of there being a CB.
It's the
Right.
same thing. Like, it's so easy, and like you can build one of these. Like, if you have the ability to build new cars, like building a
Uh-huh.
communications radio is pretty easy compared to like an engine from scratch.
Right. That's a
Yeah.
really good point. Yeah, when
Like, you have a
you're
soldering
talking
iron,
about
you're
like
pretty much set.
Okay, so a couple other thoughts that I had watching before you watched the show. In the
Right.
trailer, the production value looked awesome.
Oh yeah.
Um, they
Especially
set
for a
up,
TV show.
yeah, right.
This was
Like
like
it,
B movie level. And I'm not
yeah,
dissing B movies there. It's like, it's very impressive for a TV show.
yeah, absolutely. Especially when it's coming out of Germany, who's only just now really getting back into the world stage of cinema. At
Yeah,
least that's what I
I
read
mean,
on an article online.
you're not wrong.
Okay.
Germany has had a tradition for a very long time. They have just enough of a population where they can afford to dub stuff.
Uh-huh.
So when you tune in to watch, to just go back to Star Trek: The Next Generation, when you tune in to watch that in Germany, it's in German. So when they make movies and
Okay.
TV, they tend to make it in German. It's not really needed to be for export because there's enough people to
Uh-huh.
consume their media locally. So we haven't been
Got
getting
it.
in the US a lot of German media because it's all in German and no one likes it enough to like dub it or subtitle it. And Americans don't like watching stuff with subtitles anyway.
That's so true. Yeah. I mean, I feel like thanks to Netflix, I'm finally getting used to it with shows like Money Heist out of Spain and
Hmm.
another German show called Dark, which
Same
also is
producers.
post-apocalyptic. Yeah,
Same
the same
producers as
production
this one,
company
yeah.
took.
And a
Uh-huh, which
couple
is pretty
actors
great.
I saw in there that looked a little
Yeah.
familiar.
Yeah, I definitely recognized Oliver Masucci, who is Ulrich in Dark. He
Yes.
plays Moses in Tribes.
And he also
Who else?
played Hitler that one time.
In what?
In I think the English title was Look Who's Back. It was like a time travel adventure where Hitler comes back to modern day Germany
Uh-huh.
and has to understand what selfies are. It was it's a surreal weirdness ride that is definitely worth catching, and he plays Hitler.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to look this one up because I loved his character Ulrich. It's really dark, brooding, kind of internalized. Um, and
He
now
was a
with his,
one of those characters you really like not liking.
yeah,
Where it's just like
exactly.
a bad person and you like, oh yeah, he's gonna get it.
Yeah, and then as Moses in Tribes, he's hysterical.
Yeah, it was fun to get to see, and because I'd seen him before, I knew that, Ulrich, he wasn't being typecast as like a shitty
Uh-huh.
person. He's a funny guy and a talented actor. So it was fun
Mm.
to get to see him kind of stretch his funny chops again.
Yeah, so great. But yeah, I really enjoy that Netflix keeps bringing us more and more stuff from around the world. I think it's really important for us as Americans to get to see that there is other stuff out there. Because growing up, I maybe saw one or two international films before I was 25, and that was
Yeah.
unfortunate.
I mean, the US puts out a lot of really high quality entertainment. Like I saw
Yeah.
lots of foreign films growing up, but that's because I was watching American films. And they were the foreign films.
Right.
Um
Yeah.
so you watched the show, you mentioned before we started recording, you watched this in English.
Oh yeah. So the show is in German. I think that's actually a bilingual show, right? They have a lot of English lines. If I
That was actually one of the things had that I felt was a little weird. All of the names for these different tribes are in English.
Mhm.
We've got the Crows, we got the Crimsons, we got the Origines, which isn't like
Yeah.
an English name, but they say it in English. They pronounce
Yeah.
it as if it's in English.
Right.
Um, and in German, that sounds kind of cool. That's like a thing where,
Oh, okay.
a gang name in English sounds cooler than the same gang name in Germany. It's
Okay.
it's a little bit like how Rammstein sounds way cooler because they're singing in German, where like if
Uh-huh.
they were singing the things they're singing in English, we wouldn't think it was cool because the things they sing about are frequently really stupid.
I do remember I remember translating what is it? You hate me, and it was like
And
that's
that's
kind of lame.
wordplay that doesn't even work in English.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, yeah, because there's no difference in pronunciation between the word hast and hast, which
Uh-huh.
would be hate or have.
Oh, okay.
They're spelled different, but there's no pronunciation difference. So when he says like "you have me" or "you hate me," that's like a dichotomy there, and
Interesting.
the "you" and "you hate" or "you have," it's yeah. There's and Rammstein does a lot of that. There's a lot of really fun wordplay in their songs that kind of gets lost when you translate it.
Gotcha.
And there was some of that in this show too. So I was wondering what it was like in English because in German it was good, but it was also like a little weird that suddenly all these German speaking people are deciding that all their gang names need to be in English.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I watched it with the English dubs
Yeah.
because I was having a hard time keeping up with the subtitles and taking notes. I took a lot of
Yeah.
notes on this. And so I was never a great typer, so I have to look at my screen while I'm typing. So yeah, just having it in English helped me out a little bit. I wanted to watch it in German and be able to read the subtitles because I know that they do a bunch of stuff with with certain characters speaking English, and then I don't know if there's a word for Jinglish, like Spanglish, where they're kind
Why
of
not?
bouncing back and forth. Did that happen?
Well, there was some lines that I mean, there's parts of the show where they just start speaking English, and it becomes very clear that the the location they're in that they refer to as Europa, which also was weird because that's not how you pronounce that in German.
How would you pronounce it in German?
Europa.
Okay.
Yeah, but they say Europa, like specifically like the English pronunciation
Oh,
of Europe, but
interesting.
Europa, which is
Yeah.
was very interesting. But it becomes very clear that that these different tribes, etc., have people who have come together from different parts of Europe, and obviously Europe is multilingual already.
Uh-huh.
So there was, some people were clearly of Dutch ancestry, and there were people who spoke English to each other, and there was someone who seemed like
Mhm.
he would have been of North African ancestry, and it's not clear if his tribe came
Uh-huh.
over before the collapse or after. But it was interesting
Mhm.
to see the language mixing there a little bit, where they just switch languages back and forth, and it seems like in the show everyone knows enough of these various languages to switch back and forth kind of fluently, which was the case in a lot of Germany,
Gotcha.
and in a lot of Europe, actually, going back to like the 1700s or 1600s, where traders, for example, would have to speak. If you were in Sweden and you were trading back then, you'd have to be able to speak at least French and German in addition
Mhm.
to Swedish. And it
Right.
seems like that's
Right.
kind of come back a little bit, where
Well,
you
that's
just have all these people coming and going, speaking different languages, and everyone kind of picks up what they can.
yeah, it was really neat. I there was definitely a lot of pulls towards like the way Europe used to be, with a lot smaller city states, a lot more tribalism before the major countries of Europe formed only pretty recently when you look at a European map. Um,
Oh yeah,
and I thought that was pretty neat how it was literally like a backtrace to an older Europe.
yeah. I don't know if I don't know how long this show was in production, but
Mhm.
it felt like they were playing up the Brexit thing quite a bit. That there's a scene, and I don't think this is a spoiler, considering what we've been through so far. There's a
Uh-huh.
scene where one of the characters is looking at newspaper clippings of like that are old for him, that happened
Uh-huh.
during the collapse. And one of the big things that they like zoom in on is that it says that the European Union has been dissolved.
Mhm.
And considering recent history, it feels like that was like a big like point at Brexit, as like this is not a good path to go down.
Yeah, I did actually see a couple articles with the showrunner, Philip Koch. I hope I'm saying that right.
Sure.
He was the showrunner, the director, and the writer.
Yeah.
Help me out. I,
I mean
Koch?
Koch, but I mean, yeah, Koch is fine.
Okay, I'll just say Coke. Yeah, he said that it was originally inspired by Brexit, which is pretty
Okay.
wild, and it's interesting because he mentioned that you know the last 4 years have only become more poignant in this story, um, as Brexit has taken hold and as
And how badly it's worked.
yeah, exactly. And, not just in Europe, but also in the United States, we're just seeing this pull away from a single identity, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think it's a thing that happens a lot in post-apocalyptic media in general,
Hmm.
is this focus on individualism, of like, oh, this one person or this one tiny clique is like super strong, etc., where really, if we look at any point in human history, the only reason we've survived as a species is because we have an ability to work together in large groups,
Right.
something that other animals, generally speaking, they can't like get there. I mean, there's exception, ants work together pretty well, but
Yeah. All right. And you also mentioned a little bit earlier, I want to just go back to this real quick before we move on. How did the words sound in English? They totally made sense. I mean, you got the crows. That's,
right.
pretty simple to follow. Crimson's is literally the color, their highlight color that they wore, easy to follow. I
Yeah.
think that they were probably imagining an international audience that mostly speaks English, and so they shaped it for
Was
English
the dub
speakers.
quality pretty good?
It was great. The voice acting was spot on. I mean, spot on as far as it was really enjoyable to watch, and it felt
Right.
really well acted. I do know that while I had the subtitles on, they often fought each other, but just
I
in
can see that.
exact words, not in what they were trying to say.
There was a few times, and the other show we mentioned earlier, Dark, which was from the same producers, which is
Mhm.
also a great show on Netflix that I recommend. It kind of requires you to take notes
Oh my
while you're
gosh, yeah.
to keep track of it. It's a pretty complex show, but there were a lot of cases in this as well as in Dark where I felt like the subtitles either glossed over stuff or were just kind of straight up wrong about what the character said,
Wow.
which was
Do you feel like you're missing out if you don't see it in the original? And I
no,
mean, that's probably
I
a
don't think
common
there was
thing.
anything wrong with the subtitles per se. Like if you were following the narrative that was in the subtitles, that was like a fine story. And
Okay.
but there was some things where like someone would say something and and it's hard for me because I speak several languages to know if the thing they were saying has subtext because I know German or
Uh-huh.
if it was meant that way.
Gotcha. That's really interesting. I mean, there's always going to be some loss of
Yeah.
understanding when there's a
It's an
translation.
impossible job to translate, especially, speech and
Yeah.
idioms, and there's so many things that just don't translate.
Yeah. And there was a lot of times when I was counting on the actor's original performance, even in German, though
Mhm.
just their facial expressions, their body language to figure out what the nuance was.
Right.
And I think they carried that really well.
Good.
All
Well,
right.
I'm glad to hear
So
the dub was good.
yeah, it was great. All right. So fill me in on what you thought about this show. Stick with no spoilers yet.
Stick with no okay, I mentioned this earlier, but I'll say it again. It's very predictable.
Hmm.
Like, I felt like I could call the pretty much the arc for each character the first time we saw them. Like, "Oh,
Uh-huh.
yeah, that guy's gonna die.
Uh-huh.
That lady's awesome. She's gonna be fine," etcetera, etcetera. Um and again, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think
Uh-huh.
the whole reliance on a show being quirky or going off the rails or you not knowing where anything is going is also kind of boring. Like everything doesn't
Uh-huh.
have to have a Shyamalan twist.
Right.
We didn't need to find out this was all a dream in the fourth episode. It's
Mm-hmm.
fine. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're like if you're really into that, maybe this is not the show for you. Um, like you mentioned, the production design was really good. Uh, the
Yeah.
acting I f- was a little hit or miss. I felt there was some
Mm-hmm.
really good acting. There was no really bad acting. I didn't think it was just
Okay.
some of it was so good that I felt like some of the other stuff was like not quite on their level, and that's
Oh,
also fine. It's a
some of those
TV show.
stars just shine too bright.
Yeah, a little bit. It's kind of like washing out the background. Um, One thing I will mention that shouldn't have any spoilers because we get to see a little bit of it in the trailers.
Uh-huh.
I have to. Uh, how do I say this in English? Emilio Sacraia, I guess would be the English pronunciation of his name. He
Uh-huh.
plays one of the main characters. He's a very talented martial artist.
Oh. Oh, he played Keanu.
Yes,
Okay.
he's a very the actor is a very talented martial artist, and you can kind of see some of it. But the fight choreography was it's hard to tell if there was not great fight choreography and they were trying to make it up with like weird editing,
Uh-huh.
or if I need to murder the director of photography. One of those two things was happening where it was not bad. The fight scenes were honestly better than some of the stuff on Game of Thrones.
Uh-huh.
Um, Whereas, that's a weird bar to set because sometimes it was really good in Game of Thrones and sometimes it was
Uh-huh.
just trash. The
Which is
fight
pretty
with
wild.
the Hound and Brienne of Tarth was so bad I
Uh-huh.
could barely watch it.
Yeah,
Um,
it was like watching
and this was
two.
better than that.
That's good.
And
Yeah,
there was
that
also some moments where there was clearly handheld camera use that I don't
uh-huh.
feel was like handheld camera use for the sake of anything other than I don't know if they didn't want to use a tripod or didn't have one handy, because there was times when the camera was moving around and it just shouldn't have.
Interesting. Okay.
Those are feelings
So
I had while watching it.
and they're all valid. So your overall impression, rad or bad?
Rad.
Awesome. So even though it fell short on a few marks, you're sticking by it.
I mean, I feel like this past year
Uh-huh.
we have been in a weird situation in that we get to consume so much media from just like being indoors and not doing anything.
Yeah.
That, and also TV shows have had to step up their game over the past few years, not
Mhm.
just because of the pandemic, but even before then, just to compete on a market where people have more options in watching whatever they want whenever they want. And that's good and bad because it kind of, it sets a bar that's really hard to reach with television, where you have this
Right.
like, I mean, this season's only 6 episodes and I've
Uh-huh.
only watched the first 3. And it's, it's hard because it's expensive, and they're basically making, like, these episodes are 45 minutes long.
Uh-huh.
They're like every 2 episodes they're making a feature film. They're making 3
Exactly.
feature films for the first episode, for the first season. That's rough. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
and I have no
impressive.
idea what the budget was, but they put it all on screen.
They really did. The environments, like the little village that the Origines live in, that we
Uh-huh.
start the story in, is really like immersive. It feels real. It feels like
Uh-huh.
something that people could have built. There's no nonsense about it. It's located in a place that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
It ties into the story of the characters and they feel connected to it. It was the only thing I would say is, like, I didn't see any farms there, which is weird, but like, are
Oh
they
yeah.
literally living off hunted meat? Like, that doesn't seem good.
Yeah. Yeah, hunter gatherer tribe.
I mean, they could be fishing also, and not to say there aren't
Uh-huh.
people in the world who, live off of fishing, but generally
Uh-huh.
they have the ability to like buy rice from someone or something, and this seemed like they were a
Right.
little more isolated. But I'm getting way into nitpick territory here because it looked amazing.
Yeah.
And also the place they visited, the little Praha,
Uh-huh.
seemed really cool. It was like some older buildings that had been like repurposed after the fall. There was I have no idea where they found so many places that were overgrown.
Yeah. Well, I know that they shot in Germany, the Czech Republic, um, or Chechnya. It was Czech. Something.
Czechia.
Czechia.
Is what they go by now, but Czech
Oh,
Republic is the formal name.
okay, good. And one of Slovakia, I think, as well.
That seems right.
Yeah. So yeah, pretty wild. And I never think about that like a German production would shoot across Europe the same way that, an LA production will shoot across North America.
That an
You
LA
just
production will shoot as far inland as Kern County.
Yeah.
They might go as far as the Malibu Hills.
Yeah. All right, let me share a few of my thoughts here because
Yeah.
I know I said let's watch 3 episodes. I could not stop. I stayed up way too late and ended up binging the entire thing. I'm going to try to not talk past it because I know I don't even want to spoil it for you. But what I got to say after watching the whole season is I want so much more. They set up a really great world in this show that you really feel exists. Sometimes world building in a post-apocalypse style movie, they forget to build the world outside of like a small location, to let you
Yeah.
know what's going on outside. And I think there was enough mystery and enough mythology about what was going on outside them that you just your worldview of the show is large, and I love it.
Good.
So even though it's in German and English, I found it really easy to follow. That could come from the predictability, but they definitely didn't hit you with too many characters right away. So it's a real easy story to follow. It's not like Game of Thrones where you got to watch it a whole other time to know what the heck's happening.
Or Dark.
Yeah, or Dark. Oh my gosh, Dark is impossible to follow. It needs like a companion manual.
You need a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I think so.
Link everything together.
Yeah, and they do it like in Dark. a lot of the characters do it. And I'm always like, why can't they just give me the image of this character's research as my own little like research poster just to follow along? Um, each of the leads, and this is the three siblings, they're all following a different path, and each of their storylines work for their character. And it's directly related to what that character wants. When we're first introduced to them, each of these characters has like a want or a need, and that's just good story writing. The character needs or wants
Right.
something, and their storylines are directly related to that. So I think that's really great that they're kind of put in these situations that are going to test what they want. They're going to figure out what they need. Um, it, it's just great story. And then for a television show, the production value, the music, the directing, the editing, all superb. I I really think,
I can't remember a single piece of music from the show, and I'm going to say that's a good thing.
yeah, that's always a good thing. And what about the songs? They put in some original, not original, but some like sound sync music that exists out in
Yeah,
the world.
they did a good job of making it feel like it was music that was in the show,
Hmm.
like the characters were hearing it, kind of.
Yeah, there was a
Um,
couple times I was like, they didn't show a radio. There were some places where there shouldn't be power, and they had the music. That threw me off.
right, but I'm also like, like what's the smallest Bluetooth speaker you've seen?
It's pretty small.
Right,
It's
like
pretty
we don't
small.
know. There could be
Yeah.
like someone figured out how to charge an old Zune.
Right. Yeah, and at this point, I guess we need to get more forgiving about that because just like you mentioned earlier, like the technology exists today. We have all sorts of battery powered things, all sorts of solar powered things. Like,
Yeah, like the apocalypse in this show happens. What does that work out to? Like 15 years after. Well, call it like 11 years after AirPods are invented.
right.
And again, like that would maybe be hard to charge and stuff, but like there
Uh-huh.
are double A battery powered CD players that you could like
Uh-huh.
hook up to a home solar panel, like one of those little phone charger solar panels.
Yeah.
Then if you let it charge for like a couple days, you could get like a solid evening's music out of it
Uh-huh.
for your little dance
Yeah.
party with your friends.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, comparing like a more modern post-apocalypse, like a future post-apocalypse versus the 80s where everything had to be plugged in and maybe you had a crappy battery from Radio Shack that would power it for a little while. But rechargeables were a lot more rare and a lot more expensive. Anyway, comparing to that, I think yeah, we can be a little bit more forgiving when it comes to the technology that gets left behind.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
feel like how many phones have you had in the past like 10
oh
years?
shoot, a dozen or
And
more.
all of them had like a really advanced battery in them.
That's true. They last for years, getting recharged
Yeah.
hundreds of
Like
times.
you could smash a few phones open from a pile somewhere and you could power like a lot of those little like you're not going to power a microwave, but like you could power these little like, oh yeah, we're going to have a dance party once a week in our little commune in the woods.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Okay,
That feels
so
plausible.
overall, I'm also giving this one a rad. I think it was a great story. I didn't feel cheap in any way. I felt like challenged as a watcher, but not so much I couldn't follow it. So I'm saying rad. I think everyone needs to watch this one.
Fine. We already told them not to listen to us. Like I don't.
All right. And since we've both given our rad or bad, let's move on and we'll kind of this is where we're going to say that the from here on out it's going to be Mad Max Beyond Spoiler Dome.
Wow.
Yeah. Enjoy that.
Welcome to Makeshift Forces Things.
Ye- That's the show. That's the Apocalypse Postcast. I mean, even in the title, I'm just forcing
Yeah,
things.
no, it's great.
All right. So I don't know if there's going to be spoilers from here on out, but if there are, I'm not editing them. Is all I'm going to say.
Yeah. So
Uh,
if you watch the show sans spoilers, hit
Yeah.
pause, watch
Yep.
the whole binge the first half of the show,
Uh huh.
and then
Yeah.
hit unpause and see if you agree with us.
Yeah. We're going to get a little bit deeper. Deeper penetration into. Good God.
Wow, reset the sexual harassment timer.
Yep, there it is. I said, well, I guess it's a spoiler and never mind. All right, so let's start with the story because I feel like it felt a little rushed at times, but at the same time, versus some shows that just take forever to get to the point, I felt this one was
Hmm.
very driving. What'd you think about the pace of the show so far?
Um, the first episode I felt had a little bit of the TV show pilotitis, where you're trying to like show a lot of stuff in the first episode in order to sell the show. And I don't know how this show was greenlit. I don't know if that was a pilot episode or if they sold this on story alone.
Hmm.
They might have sold it on story alone because there was clearly a lot of money went into this first episode.
Hmm.
Um, so we got to see like a good opening where we got character introductions, which I felt were paced perfectly. We got like
Hmm.
introduced to characters naturally and in a great way where they are like memorable enough, and they skipped over some names and whatever, but which was also a one of those things that felt predictable. I was like, oh, they didn't mention that guy's name, so he's dying in 10 minutes.
That's true, huh? They did that a few times.
Yeah,
They
and
had they
then he
had
died 10
the
minutes
shirt
later.
definitely had red shirts.
Yeah.
Yep.
And again, not a bad thing. I think I do feel like when we get to the point where there's some conflict in the show, which pretty early in episode 1, I feel like they
Uh-huh.
had done enough character building for it to feel a little bit impactful. Even though I also felt pretty sure that like
Yeah.
all our main characters are definitely going to be fine.
Always.
Yeah. There's no way Keanu's dying here. There's no way Liv is dying here. There's no way Elia's dying here. And of course they did.
Uh-huh.
Spoiler.
Right. Yeah. And it's a it's right.
They
Yeah.
tried
Spoiler,
to
the
show us
three
Liv
leads of the
dying.
show
And I
survive.
mean, she got stabbed in like the lung and tossed off a cliff, smacking her head
Yeah.
into solid rock. And I was like, really? They're killing
Uh-huh.
off the character who did narration halfway through the first episode? I don't buy it. And yeah. And no, she did not die from that somehow.
That was a good way of yeah, and it was very surprising anyone would be able to survive that, but that was a good way of separating her from everyone else.
It was
Because
great. It was a great story element. And I did feel like when we see her get stabbed and then like it was like, oh well, maybe that's survivable, and then she gets chucked off a cliff. I was like, oh holy shit. And I
yeah.
did feel I felt like we'd spent enough time with the character that felt impactful, which that is a good thing.
Uh-huh.
And then they
Yeah.
took the
Yeah,
impact away, but still.
What was her name? Hana, maybe? Keanu's lady interest.
Yeah, Hana feels
I
right.
feel like they could have built her up just a little bit more, and it got lost in the shuffle of the first major battle that it was
Yeah.
even her getting hit. I was like, who was that? And I had to go back and see who it
Yeah.
was. So
I thought they were gonna take that further and turn her into like a permanent thing. I think it was just like a way to show maybe that the character of Keanu wants to leave, but maybe that's one of the reasons he hasn't left yet. So now he is like free to. It's kind of released him from his village that he's from, that he does want to leave, but he's got Hana there. I mean, he had other things there. He had but he lost kind of his whole family and his home, and then also, his sex partner, just like right there. And then now he's kind of like off the leash and can just go do whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, and you brought that up because each of our three characters, they all want something in the beginning, and I mentioned that this all ties to their storyline. Keanu, he really wants to kind of spread his wings, see what else is out in the world. He's obviously not made for this very low-key survivalist lifestyle. He has higher ambitions, and he doesn't really want to run the tribe. He thinks that Liv is the better choice for that, and she probably is the choice. But yeah, so he gets put in a place where now he becomes a slave of the crows after this first battle, and has to start like slowly figuring out chess moves to rise in the ranks of the crows.
Yeah, and I feel like that fits in really well with him feeling frustrated with his original tribe when he was in the Origines, as they're called.
Yeah.
Which sounds ridiculous when you say it in the middle of a German sentence, trust me. that he felt like he was kind of at a dead end. And when I mean, obviously, at first he's devastated that he's been enslaved. That's,
Uh-huh.
clearly this is a terrible existence. But it felt like, and I didn't get as far as you. I only got to the third episode, but we see him
Uh-huh.
start his journey inside the crows there, where it kind of seems that he's figured out that, like, oh, here there's like a ladder I can climb.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Likewise, Liv, who is the sister, um, she seems to be the family glue, the one that wants to pull everyone together, um, keep the tribe together and safe. She kind of follows in the footsteps of her dead mother, who formed the tribe, and she kind of gets put in the place of having to rescue the family to get everyone back together. That's going to be her storyline, is trying to save the family and I would imagine she wants them to go back to where they were to, kind of live as a tribe again.
Yeah, which is probably, sadly not possible because, well, I mean, there's a lot that goes into living in a commune in the forest, and the fact of the matter is most of them are dead, and if they go back there, they're probably not going to survive.
I think they did say that the original tribe was only 16 at some point, and
Right.
they had
So now they're
grown
down
to
to
around
4.
50 or 60. Yeah. Yeah, they are down to 4, aren't they?
Yeah, that's not a great start.
Yeah, and there's not a very wide gene pool there.
No, no, there is not. And it does
Yeah.
seem like the Origines were, and it's a very cool concept and one that we haven't seen explored much in post-apocalyptic fiction. That they, instead of having like this traditional like defensive wall or whatever, they just
Uh-huh.
lived in the middle of the woods with no roads going in or out, and kind of
Uh-huh.
like banking on the fact that they wouldn't be found.
Yeah, it was reminded me a lot of The Last of the Mohicans, where they
Yeah,
just happened to have one secret passageway in and nobody could find them.
yeah. And they do mention a couple times, the dad whose name I'm blanking on for the second,
Um, he was Jacob, I
Jacob.
think. Yep.
He does mention that in the past the forest has protected us. Speaking of the tribe, and I think that's what he's talking about, is that just no one knows where they are exactly. They know of
Mhm.
them maybe, but no one
Right.
ventures that deep into the woods.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a cool concept, because generally when we get to see these tribes, and even the other tribes that we see, the Crimsons, who are some kind of military state that's forming in this new Europa, um,
Mhm.
they have these fortified positions, and they act a lot like a modern military would, where they set up bases and they set up lookouts and they build walls. And then we have the Crows, who live in Bartok, which is the remnants of central Berlin in Germany.
Uh-huh.
Um, they also have done this like barricaded city area where they can kind of physically keep everyone out, and all of those feel like post-apocalyptic tropes, right? That's the
Yeah,
Citadel,
absolutely.
that's Gastown, that's the Bullet Farm, that's
Uh-huh.
blanking on any other post-apocalyptic media right now because I'm so into Mad Max always.
I know it. I know it.
Oh, it's
Well, I mean,
the
like,
big mine in or quarry in the Postman.
yep, exactly. Yeah, so having this kind of natural fortification that you build on is, yeah. I mean, it's a natural thing. You got to find something where you can protect it because the outside world is dangerous.
Yeah. And so the Origines just flipped that on its head and just don't have any, seemingly have no defenses at all. They just
Right.
have all of their structures out in the open, but they're just so deep in the woods that no one
Yeah,
gets there.
they've got a few bows and arrows. I think they had a couple of guns, maybe with a
Yeah,
couple
Jacob
bullets, but
had
that was about it.
a full-on rifle.
Yeah.
And it is interesting to see, because we're not that far into the apocalypse, right? In
Yeah,
the
it's about
show. We're
45
like,
years.
yeah, we're, a couple generations in. So they're still working firearms, but there's also stuff like what Liv had, where she has a crossbow basically,
Uh-huh.
but she's got rifle parts on it. She's got like a buttstock and a red dot sight that are
Right.
clearly off modern rifles. She's
Uh-huh.
got the red dot sight mounted on like a rail that's strapped to the top of the crossbow somehow.
Uh-huh.
So that was pretty cool to see. They
Yeah.
did a lot of, and sadly there were some blue jeans in there, but
I know it. And the third sibling, uh Elia,
Elia.
how do you Elia? Yeah, that's how it is. Elia with a J. Um, so he's really into technology. He really wants to know what happened in the was it the Black December when the
Yeah,
power went out 45 years ago. He's got this small like Little Mermaid style collection of technology, and of course
I
he's
love
the
that.
one. Yeah, it was great. And
He's
he
got an
of course
iPhone in there. He's got like an old keyboard.
uh-huh. And of course, he's the one who finds the cube, this bit of technology, and it
The
sends him
MacGuffin.
on a mission. The MacGuffin. Oh my gosh, it was such a MacGuffin. Yeah, that's one thing I was going to mention. And it- a MacGuffin can work really well, and I think it actually works better in this than it does a lot of the time. Um, but it's in there just to create this mystery about what it does, and this is what the whole show is going to be driven by. Is just this little cube that's super mysterious and it's going to do something someday.
Well, what I thought was odd. Normally, when we see a MacGuffin in a TV show or in a movie, it's just there to drive the plot forward, but it drives the whole plot forward.
Uh-huh.
And even in such convoluted cases as like Pulp Fiction, where we have like the briefcase with something shiny in it,
Uh-huh.
um, every one of the loose little weird paths that we follow in that movie is driven by that one briefcase. Like none of that movie happens without the briefcase. And
Uh-huh.
arguably none of this series happens without the cube, but almost immediately, like in the first episode, two out of the three main characters just take off in their own different directions that have nothing to do with the cube anymore.
Right.
They
Yeah,
don't know where the cube
that's a
went.
really
They
good
never
point.
even saw the cube, like pretty much. They got a glimpse of it,
Mhm.
and then that was like, it was an incident. The finding of this cube killed their family. I mean, obviously this is a thing that happened to them, but
Right.
it's no longer a part of their lives in any meaningful way. I don't know if that changes after
Uh-huh.
episode 3.
No, I mean the cube is something that Keanu's storyline, obviously the crows are after it, so that comes up, but it is not a driving factor in his storyline, and it's not a driving factor in Liv's storyline.
Right. And I thought that
Uh,
was an interesting choice because it's still clearly like very much central to Elia's storyline and his
uh-huh.
relationship with Moses, who is this uh, kind of a cool character. He, in a way, reminded me of the Gyro Captain from Road Warrior
Yeah, very eccentric.
because like I as once we get to episode 3, which is as far as I've gotten,
Uh-huh.
we've seen 2 cars in the whole show. One was
Mhm.
a brief moment outside of like one of the crow's buildings. There's like clearly a car. Oh, I guess we see a bus also, but
Yeah.
there's clearly very few working automobiles left, or just a very limited supply of gasoline or whatever.
Uh-huh.
There are vehicles, but it's not like the main way people get it around, at least not outside of Bartok, this big city.
Uh-huh.
We see people riding horses, we see people walking. We don't see people just riding around all willy-nilly. And that's kind of like the gyro captain in Road Warrior. He has a gyrocopter, which is this like
Uh.
weird thing that people know about them. It's not like a what the hell is that? And this guy
Yeah.
has this old VW, like really cool modified VW. I forget the name, but it originally was like a half van, half pickup. It's built on like the
Uh-huh.
VW bus kind of deal, but it has like a flatbed in the back. And I thought that
Yeah, it was
vehicle was
a
really
really
good.
great vehicle.
It's
Mhm.
it's customized in all like the right ways where I feel like it threads the needle of post-apocalyptic vehicle ridiculousness that we like in all of our media and
Uh-huh.
actual post-apocalyptic vehicle possibility of like, yes, this would actually be a practical vehicle that someone who's doing what he's doing, which is, scavenging cool stuff and selling it to people. It felt like a vehicle he would have and would be able to maintain and would have built the way he built it, uh, and was still cool looking without being Road Warrior or Fury Road ridiculous.
That's a really good point, and I did love, the props and the vehicles in this. They all really felt well designed, like they had, story and history built in. Sometimes, with an art department, they can just slap things on, and, we've even seen that with, events like Wasteland Weekend, where there's kind of the basic version you can do, like just make that look good and throw it in the
Yep.
background, and then there's the stuff that really shines, and it's got layers, it's got really a lot of thought put into it. It has history that you can read on first glance.
Yeah. There was one moment since we're still on this bus,
Yeah.
they're being chased by some guys on horseback who have guns, and they're shooting at the bus. And no one told the sound department what was going on, I think, because when we see this bus, it clearly has a glass windshield,
Uh-huh.
but the side windows are these plastic, like maybe acrylic sheets
Yeah.
that he has on hinges so he can just kind of push them open.
Uh-huh.
And there's no apparent rear window because the back of this vehicle is all like completely full of like boxes and things out on a flatbed.
Uh-huh.
And they're shooting at him from behind, and we get that classic shot of the guys sitting in the car being shot at from behind where the rear window gets blown out and you hear the glass shattering, and it's just like what window did they just shoot? I'm very confused.
Yeah. There was another spot like that. I think it's actually in the later episodes you didn't get to, where the crow Vivaris slaps
Vivara?
Keanu. Vivara.
Lord Vivara, was that her name?
Yeah, I think so. Right. Some of these names, they're really Vivara.
Varvara. Okay.
Varvara.
Lord
Yep.
Varvara.
Yeah. So she's got Keanu in capture, and at one point she slaps him, and she has these like cat claw rings that she wears.
Those are cool.
Yeah, there
They
is
didn't look very
another great
practical,
prop.
but very cool.
Exactly. Yeah. But she slaps Keanu, and they make a that knife or that like sword twang sound as they hit him, but it was only a slap. He didn't have any injuries, and so they could have gone with the regular old
Slap sound.
slap sound.
Right.
But when he got back up, I was expecting him to have these giant cuts on his face, because they obviously made the knife sound, and he did not. So yeah,
Did
sound
you,
department missed a couple times.
Did you catch the Wilhelm scream in episode 1?
Yes. There's more than one.
Oh, good. I was hoping, because I caught the one and I was like, oh yeah, that's good. Episode 1, getting the Wilhelm out of the way, but
Yep.
I'm glad to hear there's more.
Yeah, there's more. There's one more. There's two altogether. And sometimes, I don't know, the Wilhelm scream, I love when I hear it, because I'm just like, yes, there's some people that get it, that, no matter how seriously you take a production, you can still have a little bit of fun with it.
Oh, yeah.
But by the second time, I'm like, I got it.
Yeah, we already heard the Wilhelm scream. You're all right.
Yeah.
I was watching this with my partner Marie, and she was not familiar with the Wilhelm scream. She'd never heard of it. So I actually ended up playing a compilation of Wilhelm screams.
Nice.
Going back to the original Wilhelm and the previous. Did you know the original Wilhelm, Private Wilhelm, was not the originator of the Wilhelm scream?
Is that right?
I found that out yesterday. It predates him by 2 years.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm blanking on the names of the actual pieces of film history right now, but in 1951 there was the original Wilhelm scream, and the Private Wilhelm, who the Wilhelm scream is named for, that was actually a dub.
Oh wow.
Where they used the original, like used the Wilhelm scream on Wilhelm, and then he got his name.
Oh, that's hilarious. And for anyone that doesn't know the Wilhelm scream, here it is. There you go.
Once you've heard it, you can never go back to watching a movie the same again, because it's in everything. And now when you hear it every time, you're going to be like, oh, there you go.
Yep. Yeah. And there's a few things out there kind of like that, where it's just, movie geeks just sending out little Easter eggs for movie geeks.
I wish I'd never learned After Effects, because there's some like blood splatter effects and some like dust puff effects that once you know what they look like,
oh
you can't
yeah,
unsee how they're in absolutely everything.
Yeah, like a lot of filmmakers buy these in packages of like a dozen, and so there's not a whole lot of options, and you end up seeing them quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Why the Foley department always pretty much starts anew, and the special effects department uses canned blood, I don't know.
Maybe they just don't pay special effects people enough.
That's probably what it is. Pay your special effects people.
Yeah. What the hell, man?
So there are a few other Easter eggs in there. Um, of course, kind of a broader Easter egg. It does follow Game of Thrones season 1, where the siblings are all separated, and depending how far you got, I won't say more than that for your benefit, Swede.
Sure, thanks.
um, let's see, Oliver Masucci. I'm not pronouncing that right. He actually utters a
No,
line.
that's how he pronounces it anyway.
Oh, okay, good.
Masucci.
Yeah, he utters a line later on about having deja vu, which is a callback to his character in Dark, which a
Yes.
lot of fans online were talking about, which was pretty
That's kind
fun.
of cool.
Yep. And the Boj Arena, again, I don't think you've gotten here yet. It
I'm
strongly
aware of it, but I haven't gotten to see it
gotcha.
yet. But
Okay.
they've referenced it because in episode 3 they start talking about how Keanu's character wants to, and if is it? Do you think he's named for Keanu Reeves and they just spelled it wrong?
I mean, his character is very Keanu Reeves like.
Right.
So
and just to be clear,
maybe
like Keanu Reeves is not in this. There's a character who's named Keanu with an I.
Yep.
And that's the character's name, not the actor. The actor is Emilio Sakaya.
Yep. But yeah, of course, the Boj Arena, which is German or Slavic or something, means combat, is paying homage to the Thunderdome, of course.
Well, I mean, I was assuming that's where it was going.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's even got like the layered tiers on the outside for everyone to watch the battles. I mean, it's very gladiator like. I mean, most apocalyptic battle sequences like this, they end up being very gladiatorial because, when you value human life a little bit less, death becomes entertainment.
Yeah.
So that was really fun. So there was also a little bit of foreshadowing in the story that I thought was pretty cool. The dad, Jacob, he's never wrong. And right away he tells the kids, don't get involved because we need to stay here, stay uninvolved, stay hidden. And almost immediately, that's when they get discovered, is when the kids go in search of this spaceship.
Yeah.
I thought
he's wrong about where the pilot is in episode 1.
Well, yeah, I guess he is wrong about that.
In his defense, that was a total like shot in the dark, like picking between two places. So
yeah. Yep. But yeah, I thought there was some cool foreshadowing. Again, right in the first episode, who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, and exactly how this story is going to play out. You just don't know all the details in between.
Right. And I mean, that's where all the good stuff is. Speaking of knowing who the good guys are and who the bad guys are.
Yeah.
How'd you feel about the costuming and production design of like telling these different groups apart? Because I thought it was a mixed bag.
Uh-huh.
Some of it was not as detailed as I think reality would lend itself to after having been that long without access to like newly fabricated clothes. But it was very easy to tell the different groups apart, which especially in cases like the big battle scene between the Origines and the Crows, that helps a lot.
Right.
Like it was very clear
sometimes
what was going on, who was winning. And that's not always the case. Sometimes it's just a bunch of jump cuts of like random people swinging swords and you just don't know what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because the Crows especially are incredibly clean. They have perfect clothing. They obviously have the means of some sort of manufacturing.
And I'll
later
kind of
on,
buy that from them because they have a whole city at their disposal, basically.
Right. Yeah. Some of the costumes, especially once we get out of the smaller tribal areas, are a little too clean, a little too perfect. But yeah, I do appreciate when filmmakers take that extra step to make sure who's who, especially in a larger story like this, where they're kind of bouncing around between these three stories. We're seeing a lot of different tribes and definitely hearing about a lot of different tribes. So to keep a visual signal on who's who definitely helps. And even like the actors in each group, the Crows are thin, almost like, what am I trying to say here? They kind of remind me of like the vampires in Underworld, where they're all really trim. They're all really.
Yeah, they did have not just a costuming thing, but they did have like a look they were going for clearly with the actors.
Right. And then with the Crimson, they're kind of like an army, like a pseudo army group that are trying to be
Dukes of the
peacekeepers.
Nuke.
Yeah, they're the well, they probably have a slightly better, higher ambition than the Dukes of the Nuke. but but yeah,
David
they
Ross's character isn't Party Chief Mango.
uh, actually, yeah, that's actually a really good fit. Yeah, they wear this almost like deserty color, but then they have highlights of crimson red and some yellow, which I wasn't sure what the yellow was supposed to signify yet, but yeah,
I
they were
thought it was
very
really
Dukes of the
cool how
Nuke.
they weren't getting it was one of the things that took me out of it a little bit when I was watching The Postman was
Uh-huh.
how they'd clearly made all these custom clothes. And I'm
Uh-huh.
looking around this quarry they live in and I'm like, where the hell are you making all these custom clothes, bro?
Yeah.
Whereas with the Crimsons, it felt like a lot of the red things that they were wearing were very organically put in. Like David
Uh-huh.
Ross's character at one point has his jacket open and he's just wearing like a red t-shirt with print on it. Like it's a leftover from a sports team or like a whatever that just happened to be
Yeah.
red, and that's the t-shirt he's wearing. And there was a lot of that where it's clearly just a red piece of clothing. It's not, everyone doesn't have the same red piece of clothing. It's like just a something that they picked up somewhere
Uh-huh.
that was red. I was like, oh, I'm keeping this because it's red. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and could kind of go back to how some things weren't distressed. Like the Crows have several vehicles, including a limousine where the leather seats are still perfect. And I'm just thinking, like, 45 years with this
They making
leather
human
seat.
leather?
You know what? They could be. And but here's the
They
thing.
have
I've
horses.
I find that, I can forgive that because what it's showing is that they have means. They are now the upper echelon of society when it comes to the spoils of war. They get what they want, and they have the means of making things as nice as they want.
Right. And I will say, like, the rear seat in my 64 Thunderbird is actually fine
Oh, okay.
because it's not used a lot
Yeah.
and it's not been in the sun, and it's the leather's fine.
So it's
And
plausible.
that's old. I mean,
Uh-huh.
that's 60 years old at this point.
Yeah.
Not quite, but
Okay.
58 or whatever. So yeah, I'll buy that as plausible. Although there's always the thing, we go into this with Wasteland Weekend costuming sometimes. Of
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's plausible, but does it need to, like? Is it better that it looks post-apocalyptic or better that it's just plausible? Like, can you explain it? Yeah, you can explain how they
Uh-huh.
managed to make leather, but would it have been better if the leather was just scuffed a bit?
Yeah.
That like this is
At
the
least
best
not
we can get. We have the best stuff, but it's still not as
right.
good as 2021 good stuff.
Exactly. It would have been great to see, spots where they've used a different color black to re-dye the leather or small repairs.
Oh
Because
yeah,
obviously the Crows, they carry a lot of weapons on them. Someone's
yeah,
going to sit in that limo and pierce the seat, and just,
yeah.
a little seam mark would have been great there.
We've all done that.
Yeah.
Wearing post-apocalyptic costumes. But so, do we ever find out what the drug that the crows are inhaling before their big fight scene is?
um, no, but it's very close to crystal meth, as far as I can tell.
Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
fair. I
What
mean,
they
meth
they
was invented as or well, I don't know, invented, but it was definitely one of its first early uses was as a combat enhancer.
Yeah, because we do see when Keanu is in the factory that he's making some kind of like a cube crystal type of deal, um,
Yeah,
and it's definitely seems to. I mean, at one point, this is later on, Keanu is forced to take a hit, and it seems to have that same effect that you would recognize
sure.
from other movies,
Yeah,
like
because I thought it was it was kind of like sort of a mix between like a Fury Road reference and a
uh-huh,
video game reference where before the crows go into this big battle, like everyone takes a huff of something and
right,
they all have kind of the same inhaler thing, which
yeah,
looked kind of bulky, but it also was a great like visual. It looked really cool. And you could
yeah,
also tell because they're threatening violence, but they haven't really said anything yet. And there's still
hmm
that, are they going to or aren't they? And then everyone just takes a hit of like whatever this drug is and you're like, oh yeah, no,
right.
this is definitely happening.
Yeah, and my rough translation for what this drug was called, and I can't remember what the German was, but I tried to translate it, and they called it the cloud. Um, that was the English version.
Oh,
I wish I could remember what it was called. But yeah, it's just like, kind of a fun name for a drug. Um, which also makes me think that it's based in smoke of some kind. But they're not smoking it. They're like almost ionizing it or vaporizing it.
okay.
Yeah. Um,
Um, I th- I want to say they called it Volk.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Is my
Um,
translation good or is that way off?
yeah, I guess Cloud is pretty good.
Okay. And while we're on that, here's a
As
couple
far
others.
as like, it's yeah, it's a Dutch word. Yeah, it's just the Dutch word for cloud.
Cool. Here's another one. The crows called everyone who wasn't a crow Lubovnik, which I translated as free, maybe free man, something like that. Does that
Okay,
sound about right?
I don't know. It's not German.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, that would be more of like maybe Czech or
Yeah, there was a lot
Polish, maybe.
of really fun language influences.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. And when you're doing a post-apocalypse story, you try to create some new words because obviously, if you use only modern vernacular, it's really hard to displace it from modern day.
It gets real
Um,
fracking hard. Yeah.
right. Um, yeah. So by adding like unusual names, unusual words, and by renaming cities, I think that's a great way to kind of
And
say
that
this
that
is a different
happens
place.
over time, right? Like, a lot of cities that we know today had different or similar but changed names, 100 years ago, and
Right.
that was I thought it was interesting. It was a little, it's odder that it would happen after a post-apocalypse than that it would happen over hundreds of years,
Uh
because
huh.
nowadays we have printed maps,
Right.
and we see printed maps in the show like
Mm-hmm.
more than once, and the name would be on there. And there's a scene in the third episode where we have this captured crow,
Uh huh.
Grieta, who is spilling the beans to
Mm-hmm.
live on how to get into Bartok, this central part of Berlin.
Uh huh.
And she references places that are in Berlin now, like Wedding,
Okay.
um, by their original name, which just makes it like, well, then why'd you rename downtown Berlin?
Uh huh. And does Bartok have any meaning that you could pick out?
No, I mean, not that I know of.
It seems to be like a surname, maybe. There's Bartok the Magnificent.
I've heard the name like as a name before, as like a last
Uh-huh.
name, but
Yeah. I'm always trying to find if there's any hidden meaning in some of the names and words that
I
they
would be
use.
surprised if there isn't something in every single place name here.
Right.
Like Little Praha is obviously a reference to Prague,
Okay.
and I mean, not as in the actual Prague, but like,
Uh-huh.
maybe an area that had a lot of Czech people in it or something.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, that's right. Just like Little Tokyo, which would be
Right.
like a place where a lot of Japanese people live. So Little Braha would be where that. Okay. I get it. So what do you think about the overall like directorship of the show? Because Philip Koch, I, I forgot how you pronounce it again, but we'll just stick with Koch. Philip
Yeah.
Koch was the showrunner, writer, director. He also had Florian Baxmeyer direct a couple shows. I think a couple episodes, I should say. I think they did a great job of creating a great storyline, and
I
I
agree.
yeah
I thought the directing was good.
yeah I
Again,
think
there was some camera work that those were decisions I wouldn't have made, but
uh huh
okay. Like, and I don't know how much of that was just like the demands of where they were filming. I don't know how much of this was practical sets and how
right
much of it was on location and how much of it was green screened. I
uh
will
huh
say, there's some obvious CGI elements. Like,
uh huh
obviously in the real world you don't have like floating cubes, or spaceships. Not that it was a
uh huh
spaceship, but like, we don't have airplanes that look like that. That
right
was obviously CG. It did not look bad by any means, but I honestly couldn't tell if they green screen stuff in general.
uh huh
So if they
yeah
did, great job. If they
Mm-hmm.
found these locations in real life, I'm very impressed. There was some incredible sets. There's a
Yeah.
scene where all of the newly enslaved Origines and some of the monks from Little Pra are being taken to Bartok, and they're walking down a
Mm-hmm.
street with these like ruined buildings on either side. And I think some of the shaky camness that was happening there was just the cameraman is like in a bunch of rubble trying to
Uh-huh.
film. There was maybe no way to get a dolly in there, and I kind of get it, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It took me out of it a
Gotcha.
little bit, where it was, oh, this doesn't look so great.
It's interesting because I'm obviously a camera operator myself, but I
Yeah,
didn't none of the cinematography no, I'm sorry, none of the camera work s stood out to me as wrong. Like, I was just kind of on it the whole way. Their framing choices, the handheld versus the smooth stuff, none of it bothered me. I thought it was great. It's just something that didn't even poke out, and that's something I'm always watching because
right.
I wanna learn what are they doing here?
Yeah,
The thing that did stick out was how overly naturally lit the exterior scenes were, and then how stylized and almost candy they were for the interiors.
yeah.
Because, most of the time outside you just light with the sun, maybe you add a scrim or some reflection. It's really hard to compete with the sun to light.
It's
And
bright.
so
Yeah,
sometimes you just don't. But then when you're inside, you got full control. And so you can kind of, get a little bit more creative. And the disparity between the two stuck out to me, where they were going so stylized inside and so natural outside that it just felt so different.
yeah. Uh, I did notice that. I didn't. I didn't feel like the interiors were too stylized. In
Hmm.
that, I think the thing that they did well with the interior lighting was it felt like a way that the people who were there would have lit something. Like the lighting
Mm.
inside the Volk production complex felt
Hmm.
very different from the interior of the fortress with the Crimsons, for example.
Yeah, agreed.
And that, like, if you watch some, you know, this is not as high a production value show, but Sci-Fi's version of Dune
Hmm.
that they had a lot of stylized lighting. And I think part of the problem was, regardless of who you were looking at and what situation you were looking at, the stylized lighting was kind of always the same. So you had these like different factions, and it felt like they all used like the same interior decorator as far as lighting went,
Uh-huh.
and that
Uh-huh.
was bad. And I feel like in this case, yeah, it was very stylized, but it was also stylized in a way that felt like it fit in with who was there.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that's where it didn't bother me so much because each of these different factions, they definitely had a look and the lighting just accentuated on that.
Yeah.
Yep. Sound wise, other than a few like misplaced sound cues, I was into it. It sounded like even when I did watch the original German in the beginning, it sounded like they got some great pickup on their mics. The mix sounded good. The the voiceover dubs sounded well acted, so it was really easy to follow along.
Hmm.
Any thoughts on the audio?
No, and I'm kind of into audio, as you know.
Yeah. And that's
Uh,
the best thing is when you can go, "Nope, no thoughts." Then you
yeah,
got the
like
you did the job right.
right. I never felt like, I mean, I'm very into audio. Uh,
Uh-huh.
I run the station at Wasteland Radio. I built that whole studio myself.
Uh-huh.
I built my first home studio in like 1998.
Mhm.
Um, I work for a large manufacturer of audio products. I deal with audio all day, every day, and
Mhm.
I don't do movie audio or film or any kind of film audio,
Mhm.
but so it's easy for me sometimes to pick up on stuff that's like, oh yeah, you did this, or oh yeah, you did this, or oh yeah, you recorded that with one of these. And
Yeah.
other than like the weird sound cues where, I like I mentioned earlier, I noticed the back window being shot out of a van that doesn't have a back window. The
Right.
sound was not what took me out of that. Like, it sounded like the back
Uh-huh.
windows being shot out of the van they were in. and
Right.
I never felt like I was listening to a recording or like I was listening to ADR. It always sounded like it
Uh-huh.
was recorded on site with the stuff. Like
Yeah.
the weapon stuff sounded good, the crossbow sounded good,
Hmm.
like everything just sounded like I was actually watching what was happening. So yeah, they get
Yeah.
great marks for me on sound.
Yeah. And sometimes sound is like the first thing that doesn't work out well in TV because of the lower budgets, but obviously
Yeah.
they planned this one out. They put some money in the sound, which is always commendable.
It's not easy, recording sound uh, on site like
Right.
that, especially if you're doing, recording things in old ruins or anything.
Uh-huh.
I just never noticed the sound as being like a thing. So
That's
clearly they
great.
did a great job.
Yep. Um, you had mentioned some of the fight sequences. I actually really enjoyed the fight sequences in this one. I thought a lot of the fight choreography worked really well. Sometimes it felt a little rushed. Like I would almost not have minded if they had extended a couple of these fight scenes, just to get a little bit more meat in there. Um,
Is this stuff that happens later after episode 3?
yeah, perhaps.
Okay. Yeah, because
It might.
there's not a lot of physical combat in we have the first episode, we have the big fight
Uh-huh.
between the
Yep.
crows and the Origines. And again, I will say one of the things that's really hard to do in fight choreography is to have a lot of people fighting who are on camera at the same time,
Right.
because you need everything. Like obviously you can't have people actually punching each other unless you're shooting a Hong Kong film with Jackie
Uh-huh.
Chan. I just kick the guy, it's fine.
Yeah.
um you can't, so a lot of people have to be pretending, and you can fix that with camera angles, right, where you don't see that
Right.
they're pretending, and that's way harder when there's a bunch of people fighting in the background. So every now and then you'll
Uh-huh.
see, just the ridiculousness of someone kicking like 3 feet away from someone and someone just throwing themselves on the ground. And I didn't see a lot of
Exactly.
that. I
Which would
didn't
work
like go
from
through
90
frame by
degrees to the
frame.
side.
Yeah, I didn't go
Uh-huh.
through this like frame by frame to look for any goofs, but it felt very immersive when these two big gangs were fighting, and there was various terrain, and there was lots of different people doing different
Uh-huh.
things. And again, Keanu's character, the actor, knows martial arts. Clearly, he was working really well with the
Uh-huh.
stunt people. All their close-up stuff looked really
Right.
good.
Mm-hmm.
That first fight, again, there was like everything was not great. Well, I shouldn't say it wasn't great. I should say it wasn't up to the caliber of the performances by the actors and stunt people.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I don't know if that changes once we get to see, because there is a small fight, or less fight, more beating
Uh-huh.
in episode 3, where Keanu is now in this factory in Bartok, producing
Uh-huh.
drugs, presumably for his new masters. And that stuff looked really good.
Yeah.
That was very
And
immersive.
along with the fighting, the gore, the violence, when someone gets stabbed, when someone gets hit, when someone gets beat on, I've really felt it. Like
Yeah.
a lot of the impacts, I was like, "Oh my God."
And it wasn't ridiculous. It wasn't, where sometimes in order to sell it, they'll go full blood splurts everywhere. And
Right.
it wasn't, it felt like someone was like, it felt upsetting because it felt like
Yeah.
someone was being hit, and that's upsetting.
Exactly. Yeah, and some of the deaths were surprising. They were visceral. They felt real. They definitely got you good.
There's one, I'm gonna go back to nitpicking here.
Yeah.
There's a sword execution in episode 1
Mhm.
where clearly she's using either a frictionless sword. It just slides right through this guy in a way that
Yeah.
was very like, okay, yeah, that was very movie sword.
I was wondering if he didn't have any neck bones.
Right. Now maybe he doesn't. I mean, we don't know. It's the future.
That's true. Yeah, that was one that stuck out. Shoot, you know what's kind of funny is I feel like I forgive these things because the story was so good,
Oh, absolutely. And
right?
again, like obviously this is a TV show. She's not going to actually stab a guy in the neck. You have
Yeah,
to
and
film it somehow. And generally speaking, it was an impactful scene. That whole setup of the
mhm,
interrogation felt dark in a
Yeah.
way that I think is appropriate, because it shouldn't be cool when people like, I don't like it when it's cool that people die. Like,
Yeah, that's a good
that's
point.
it felt like these people were genuinely afraid, and it was upsetting to watch, and that's what you should be going for when it's violence.
Yeah, and that's when our last red shirt of the show gets gutted, right?
Yes.
You saw
The
that?
guy who's
Yeah.
do we ever find out, did we ever find out his name, or was I just
I
like, I missed his name,
I
because I
don't think
assumed he
so.
was going to die right off the bat,
Yeah, I
because
don't think so. I thought that was the uncle at first, and I was surprised he died. I was like, "Oh, shoot." But then the uncle was still alive elsewhere.
yeah, I don't
Oh, I'm sorry. No, he was dead back in the camp is what it was.
yeah.
Yep, the uncle, he's the guy with the claw hand. I thought we were gonna get to see that claw hand in action.
You know, when, because he featured early on in the episode, we saw
Uh-huh.
him a bunch, played
Yeah.
by Klaus Tange from Denmark,
Mhm.
uh, who is a good actor. He was
Mhm.
in one of my favorite World War II movies. Is a Danish movie called
Oh, wow.
Flame and Citron was the name in English. Flammen og Citronen in Danish.
Sounds like a bar.
It is about Flame is a red-haired guy. That was his
Uh-huh.
nickname. It stars Ture Lindhardt and Mads Mikkelsen
Mhm.
as two famous Danish resistance movement fighters during World War II.
Gotcha.
It's worth a watch. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, I never caught his name, and they mentioned that his arm had been cut off
Yeah.
by some raiders,
Mhm.
and I was like, he was missing an arm, because I don't think they ever showed that until he was dead.
They did show it earlier.
Okay,
It
I
was
just totally
not
missed it.
he didn't get a close up. I
I
think
thought
they
that was
could have.
kind of cool that they didn't like make it a whole thing that he has like a prosthetic
Yeah.
arm.
Well, especially since it didn't come to play any more than that, I'm glad that
Yeah,
they kinda left it as
yeah,
just a little bit more of that detail that tells some more history.
yeah. And then, when he does die, we get to see him like sprawled out.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm surprised they
S
didn't like take his prosthetic arm.
That's actually a good point. That would have been a pretty neat
This
piece
seems
of
like a
tech.
thing that would be like, a valuable item in the
Right.
post-apocalypse.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh, maybe
Eh
maybe the cleanup crew came in.
maybe. Yeah, they did send scouts back after,
Yeah.
but they were after the cube, not for, any
Well,
prosthetics.
maybe they pick up whatever they
Um,
can find.
so I know we mentioned the set pieces, the costumes, the props, they were all brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I thought
Yeah.
they definitely showed a huge world, and none of it felt like, "Oh, yeah, let's just add that too." If everything was really well done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it felt like it felt convincing. It felt like
yeah.
that. Yeah, this could happen.
Yeah. So by the end of season 1, which is the first 6 episodes, we are still left with plenty of questions. I'm sorry to tell you, Swede, but we're not going to find out any more about the Atlanteans.
I didn't think we
Um,
would
we're
with
going to
only
get just
6 episodes.
yeah. I think that's going to be as many seasons as they make of the show. That's how long it'll take to figure out the Atlanteans. But I was thinking, like, are they playing up the idea of Atlantis? Or are the Atlanteans maybe North Americans? Or could they even be the British for all we know? I'm definitely curious about it because we've seen it before where an apocalypse hits a continent, but maybe on another continent they're fine.
I mean, they played that up in 28 days later, weeks
Right.
later. I forget which one they.
Hmm.
And it's also one of the things that is like always plagued the Mad Max universe of like, well, when did the apocalypse happen? And it's kind of like unclear, but like societies don't change overnight. Like if you look
Yeah.
at what happened to Britain when the Romans pulled out, that was not a change that happened in a day where like all the Romans are gone, so now we don't have any stuff anymore. Like it takes generations for that kind of stuff to change. Like there were still Roman
Uh-huh.
towns after the Romans left. There were still
Yeah.
roads after the Romans left. And then that stuff broke down over time, and it wouldn't have broken down
Hmm.
at the same pace everywhere. So what's going on
Right.
outside of Europa, as this show defines it, which I don't know where the borders are, like what's Japan like? We don't.
Hmm. Right.
Maybe they're just fine.
Right. Yep.
If you're cut off
There's
from the
also
internet,
hints.
do you even know?
That's so true. Yeah, and And yeah, I mean, a worldwide plague, just like the biblical flood. I mean, if you don't know what's past 2 hours from your house, that's a worldwide flood. But if it's just your block that floods,
Right.
I hope that yeah. So yeah, this could be pretty localized to Europe, or it could be worldwide. We don't know that yet. Also, they mentioned several other tribes that sound pretty powerful, like Femen, which we do get a hint at by the end of the show.
Yeah, apparently you're
And
not allowed to have male genitalia
when did
and
it
be
say
caught by
that?
them. I think Moses mentions it.
Oh, that's right. They said something like they'll cut you off. But it sounded like it was going to be um, more like the crows, where they're just happy to injure you. But
I mean, yeah, who knows?
yep. And then there's some northern tribe. Do you remember the name of the northern tribe? They
No.
they also sound pretty powerful, almost on the level of Crimson.
Okay.
So we'll get there
I
at
mean,
some point.
it's Europe has been through this before, right? With
Mm-hmm.
the city states and local warring factions, and it's what feels like a big and powerful entity
Uh huh.
can very quickly become not so powerful when you run into someone who hasn't been at war for the past who knows how long. And the Germanic tribes ran into this when they first met Rome, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they had been really busy fighting each other for a really long time, and now someone who hasn't had that drain on their society shows up and kicks all their asses.
Ah, yeah.
Because they're like, well, we've just been swimming in money for I don't know how long, so here's some cool stuff you've never heard of. And I feel like
uh-huh.
that could be, and like history is just rife with this, right?
Uh-huh.
America in the 1950s is the only industrial producing large nation on the planet who did not get bombed to shit 10 years ago.
Right.
Like Germany was a huge manufacturing powerhouse, but they got carpet bombed and had nothing. France was invaded and got everything destroyed. The Soviet
Uh-huh.
Union had everything like just run into the ground,
Uh-huh.
economy in tatters. And the US kind of was sitting there like, well, I mean, no one invaded us. Look at all these things we built, and took over like the automobile manufacturing for the whole planet pretty much. And like all the
Right.
cool stuff came out of the US because the US had this giant economy that hadn't been drained by being bombed. And I could see the Atlanteans
Yeah,
kind of
that's
playing into that, where like maybe there's just some countries out there who are fine, and instead of like maybe they just don't want to get involved. They don't like
uh-huh.
they haven't been trying to save Europe because Europe is kind of a mess right now. And there's a bunch of people fighting each other and making drugs in Berlin and driving around
That's true.
in
Yeah,
up
just kind of
armored
thinking of it
VW
like
bugs.
right. Yeah, and kind of ignore it the same way that the first world ignores most of Africa and South America today. Like
Yeah.
we're not really paying attention to what's happening because we're just worried
Or
about
any
our own
country
stuff.
that's going through disastrous amounts of strife back and forth,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah, you
just
just kind of stay
keep making
uninvolved.
iPhones about it.
Right. And that's a good point too, in is the technology in tribes of Europa. I mean, we're talking 75, no, 55 years in the future. So theoretically, if some country was unaffected, their technology could have advanced to the point where it looks alien to us today.
Yeah. What was the quote? Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, if you beamed our like just 2021 technology back to yourself 30 years ago in
Right.
1991,
Yeah.
the concept of what a laptop can do today, or even less like an Android smartphone, would be eh, basically like an institutional supercomputer.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm old. I'm not that old, but I'm 41 years old,
hmm
and I mean, I remember a megabyte being an unattainable amount of RAM.
Uh-huh.
And the computer I'm sitting at right now, it's like 32 gigabyte, 32,000 of those units.
Yep.
It's great. So yeah, if you span that out to someone who is isolated from this disaster,
Uh-huh.
they could definitely have what they call a hover jet.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got several countries in the world that are making actual advances in fusion,
Yeah,
and so to think that in 50 years we'll have fusion powered stuff is it's not crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've been saying
Um,
that for 50 years. But yes,
yeah.
no, it is actually possible, and I think I hope that, well, first of all, do we know if this is getting a season 2? I know it hasn't been greenlit yet, but do you know if they've been
Uh,
talking about it?
they have not. The way they left it off makes me think that they
They have
are
to.
assuming they are. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm definitely thinking there's going to be more. And with Netflix behind it, Netflix does tend to do 2 to 3 seasons of a show
Hmm.
before, leaving it in the
I
dust.
think Dark got 3, right?
Dark got 3 and they wrapped it up. Yep.
Yeah.
I would imagine the same kind of situation.
Okay.
And hopefully more episodes in the next couple of seasons as well. Um, and the
It would
last
be
couple,
nice. I feel like 6 was. I mean, there were 45-minute episodes, which is
uh-huh.
plentiful, but I
Yeah.
do feel like 6 is a little short.
Yeah. And I wouldn't mind if they kind of slowed down the storytelling a little bit.
Sure.
So the last thing that we still have no idea about is there's almost this Games of Thrones White Walker threat from the East called the Black Swarms or the Black Knight or the Black something, which is
Mm,
pretty interesting because just like Game of Thrones, they introduced the idea that it's out there and then really don't tell us much about it.
okay.
Yep. So
I feel like they did
unfortunately,
that well in the beginning in Game of Thrones, and then kind of just trashed it at the end. But
yeah, yeah. Hopefully we don't see that situation happen again. Good God.
the unknown and ominous threat is, it's kind of a trope, but it does work well on humans.
Yeah. And it keeps you involved and they just hint at it a little bit and that'll be the through line for however many seasons they have, whereas some of these other storylines can be kept,
Kind of have to
to a
wrap up,
season or shorter. Yeah,
because otherwise it
exactly.
gets ridiculous as to this. If you were in such a hurry, why haven't you wrapped this up yet? And you end up with
Yeah.
Days of Our Lives.
Yep. But hopefully the black smoke or the black swarms, it's a little smoky looking when you get to see a hint of it. Hopefully
Turns out
it's
it's
not.
just bees.
It could be. It could be. Interesting, yeah. But hopefully it
Mutated
doesn't end
fruit
up
flies.
being like the smoke monster from Lost, where it was like, oh, there's this smoke monster, but it is nothing.
You want to hear something weird?
Yeah,
I've never watched a full episode of Lost.
good for you. Keep it that way.
I've heard that.
That was
I'm
the
familiar
ultimate.
with the story, and
Yeah.
by the time, I don't remember what I was doing. I think I was very busy with something professionally at the time,
Uh-huh.
and I couldn't dedicate the amount of time I needed to another TV show. And by the time I had time to like catch up on Lost, kind of everyone was just like, "You shouldn't, just don't." It's like, okay,
Yeah, sometimes it's worth waiting and just seeing how much people's hopes are drained by the end of the show.
well, and sometimes I feel like that can kind of swing both ways, because with Game of Thrones, for example, I feel like basically everyone hated the way that show ended.
Yeah.
And I still feel like most of the show, the vast majority of that show, is worth watching,
Yeah.
even knowing that it ends badly. Because there's a lot of endings in Game of Thrones,
Uh-huh.
and the ending to the overarching political story may not have been satisfying, but there's a lot of things that, like, if you were to go back and watch the first half of season 1 of Game of Thrones, it's hard to even tell who the major players are going to be at the end of the
Right.
show, which
Right.
I think is really good. And it's very different storytelling. I mean, Psycho did it, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Hitchcock Psycho, where you just like swap out your lead halfway through the movie. Like, oh, fooled you.
It's
It's not
tough to
actually
do.
about this person.
Yep.
But so I feel like, knowing that it ends badly might sometimes turn people off from watching a show that is good until the end and might be worth watching until the end, which I do think
Yeah.
Game of Thrones is worth watching.
Yeah. Oh,
And
absolutely.
I do think this show is worth watching.
Yes. Yeah, this show is so worth watching, and I have high hopes for how it's going to continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess write your local Netflix representative and ask for season 2.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing with Netflix. You got to watch out because they'll just pull the plug out of nowhere because their thing is new content, new titles to flash.
Yeah.
Doing 8 or 9 seasons of a show is not in their business plan.
Do we know how long this was in production?
No, there's very little information on Tribes of Europa out there right now.
Because I
I
hadn't
know that
even heard of this until like a few days ago.
Yeah. And that's another thing Netflix does not do well is promote. Because this one wasn't
Yeah,
even on their new releases for me yesterday. I bet it was in Europe, but in the United States, it was not.
it was on mine.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just looking at like articles.
Uh huh.
I'm not seeing a lot of older stuff. Um, there's like an article from back in September
Uh huh.
about Oliver Vogel joining the production.
Mm-hmm.
So it was obviously, in production for more than 5 months.
Yeah. Well, I know he began writing it about 4 years ago, around the time Brexit vote happened. Yeah.
Interesting.
All right, but yeah.
So, like, what do you think the timeline might be for a season 2 then?
Oh,
A
shoot!
year?
Just based on like what they did with Dark, it was about a year, maybe 18 months. I think
Yeah.
we'll probably see it early 2022. That'd be my
Oh,
guess.
I
I
don't
know
wanna wait
that's
that
the
long.
thing is you can binge these shows and then
I know.
so much time passes before you get to see the new installment. You almost have to go back and like refresh.
Yeah. Which could be worth doing, especially, some more. I feel like I could spot some stuff in this show,
Uh
like
huh.
watching through it a second time.
Yeah.
Dark was definitely one of those shows where like you have to watch it twice or you're just gonna
Yeah.
spend half your time just being confused.
Right. With Dark, we're halfway through season 3, and I'm like, we need to make some time and go back because I have no idea who anyone is anymore.
Yeah.
I'm so lost; it's ridiculous, and I think I need to start drawing out a map,
Yep.
a time map, a 3 or 4 dimensional time map.
You know what really helps with Dark is having a family tree.
Yeah. There's probably a website that I could pull up that just has
There's more than
everything.
one.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that next. That'll be good.
All right.
And then, like I did with this show, maybe I'll just, each scene, just write out the one sentence, here's what happened.
Yeah.
Anyway,
This was much less confusing. I felt like they did a good
yeah,
job of
super
keeping it
easy to
on
follow.
track.
Uh-huh. All right, awesome. Well, I think that will about do it. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No.
Yeah, I think it's a good show. I think everyone's going to enjoy it. Oh, what I will say is for people who like um, movies or other shows like Snowpiercer, like Hunger Games, like Maze Runner, the ones that are made for a younger audience, but you want it made a little bit more for an adult, this is your show.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. It did not feel like a teen coming of age novel.
No. And that can throw you off. If you've got a family of younger people who like this genre, they may be attracted to watch it because all the stars are young, but it is not for kids.
Yeah, and it didn't feel like it was because I know maybe less with Snowpiercer, but like Maze Runner and those felt like the traditional coming of age story. Just here's a different setting for it.
Yeah.
Whereas this felt like it was kind of divorced from the characters' ages a little bit.
Right.
Where Elya's story is like would work just as well with an adult protagonist. Like I don't feel like it matters much that he's a child.
Yeah, that's a really good point. But I think again, I think it's mirroring Game of Thrones to try to be that.
Sure. Post-apocalypse Game of Thrones then.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Well, I think this show's got thumbs up from both of us. Definitely watch it. And let us know what you think in the comments. And Swede will be back for some more movie reviews, and he's going to be back on a couple other episodes as well. So thank you so much for coming on today, Swede. I think this went really well. I can't wait to do it again.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I guess that's it. So, guys, this has been me and Swede's deep penetration into tribes of Europa. I hope you had a good time. I sure did. This was a lot of fun. I had a good time. And
I had a good time too. I hope you can edit our where are we at here? Hour and 41 minutes of having fun together into something that's
no,
listenable.
it's gonna pretty much be this long. minus a few technical glitches and but I think it's gonna live long.
Right. So just want to remind all of my fans that the editing is totally on Makeshift here.
Yep, that's a good point.
blame him. I don't need any messages about it.
All right, if you did make it this far and you enjoyed today's episode, share it with your friends. If you hated it, share it with your enemies in a water balloon filled with Vaseline and glitter.
Oh, so evil.
Until next time, survivors, stay alive. Hey survivors, MakeShift here to remind you that the Apocalypse Post is brought to you in no small way by our Patreon supporters. Join the ranks for early access and exclusive content with support levels now named for fancy Fallout-ridden factions like the $2 per creation Drifter or the $7 Wastelander. Knowing you've got my back has helped me dedicate more time to this channel, spreading love of the post-apocalypse and less time on stupid real-world stuff. Sign up right now at patreon.com/theapocalypsepost.